JJ, the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. So I got two other versions to this video. I've got one that's longer that I really go through a lot of detail, and I got one that's shorter for those that are just saying, hey, give me the 1, 2, 3 on it. So this is the meat in the middle. So the links to the shorter and the longer video, you'll see them right below. So this is covering for the small business owner that is going, okay, I heard I had to file a Form 1099 for people that I had to pay. What do I do? So I'm going to give you kind of the 1, 2, 3 with a little bit of detail and maybe add a little bit of ABC related to this. But really what it comes down to is if you're a business and you've paid someone over $600, then you're in the running to have to send them a Form 1099. Now, before you roll your eyes, the thing to note is that if you are paying a large corporation like Marriott or Office Depot, that's not who this is intended for, as you can see in the instructions. This is going to be if you're paying an individual, as in a Social Security number, and they're not an employee. If you're paying a lawyer for legal services, well, you're going to have to for sure send them if it's over $600. And then if you have someone that's providing services to you, to your business, then you're going to need to send them a Form 1099, most likely NEC. Now, if you're an individual, you don't send a Form 1099. So if you don't have a business, you don't got to worry about sending a 1099 out. You say, well, I have a nanny and I have a household employee. Well, look up household employee Schedule H. You fall under W-2 and employees. So what we're talking about here is the business owner. A couple of things I want you to note is this. January 31st of the year following in which you're filing this for is the deadline to get the 1099 NEC or the 1099 miscellaneous to the recipient to get them their copy. It's really a simple form, should be plenty of time. The big thing, though, is that if you're filing a Form 1099 NEC, you have to get that to the IRS on or before January 31st as well. Now, if you're filing a Form 1099 miscellaneous, well, that's due if you're paper filing it with the IRS by February 28th, or if you are e-filing it, then you would be able to have till March 31st. So if that went too fast, just rewind, go back to it, hear it again. It's also going to be in the links that I'm going to give you. I also want you to notice that when you're sending in these forms to the IRS, it has to be on the special paper if you're not e-filing it. I'm going to show you that. And if you're mailing this to the IRS, you send in all the 1099s plus a 1096 form on top, because the Form 1096 form is the summary, if you will, of all of the Form 1099s with a couple of things that'll be noted. And I'm going to show you that real quick. What we do is we get a software. I'm going to show you that. And we fill it out on the software. We print the copies, have the recipient sent their copy, and then they're e-filed through the software with the IRS. There's ways to get this stuff for free, which I'll show you. We don't do that. We buy the forms because, again, it requires special paper for the ones that you're sending to the IRS. And for what you're printing out and sending to the recipient, well, it's special forms. So we buy the forms and we get the software each year. A couple of things I want you to note here is that if you don't mail these in on time, there are some penalties involved. If you send it handwriting, in my opinion, you're looking at penalties. It needs to be typed up. So for those of you that say, oh, I always handwrite them, well, good for you. The IRS just decided not to send you notice or any kind of penalty related to that. What you're sending to the IRS is copy A of the form with the Form 1096. And if you pay anybody by credit card, so if I'm paying somebody that's going to come and do IT services for me, it's a business, so they're provided a service, I paid them over $600, but I paid them by credit card, I don't send them a Form 1099 for the amount that I paid by credit card, because I paid through a credit card company. That credit card company, if they meet the qualifications, the credit card company is going to send a 1099K to the IT company. But if you pay someone by cash or check or Bitcoin or whatever, then you're going to be sending them a 1099 for that portion. If you paid someone with credit card and a check, you guessed it, the amount you paid by credit card wouldn't go on the 1099. The amount you paid by check would go on the 1099. Also, I want you to note that when you are trying to find, well, who is it? What we do with our clients is we go through the general ledger. That's just the detail of all the expenses. And what we're looking at is, well, do I see some stuff that doesn't look like AT&T or Verizon or Office Depot? I mean, am I seeing some names that kind of should jump out? This video is really kind of meant for the small business owner that doesn't have a GL that's this quick, right? And you're right. I mean, I don't know why you're actually watching this video. If you're proficient in QuickBooks, if you're a tax professional, you already know all this stuff, right? I'm just hitting kind of the basics here. But what I want you to note here is that when you're trying to find these, we look at the general ledger, we look at the services, IT, paying accountants or bookkeeping or legal services or other services. If you were to say, well, where I pay dues, I would say no. Where I pay my health insurance, no. Where I pay my rent, well, maybe. We'll look at that real quick. So what you got to figure out is, who do I send these to? Well, really, just deep breath. Did you pay someone over $600 for services? Probably going to need to send them some kind of 1099 NEC. The other big exception is, other than the credit card, is if you paid an LLC, that means they had an EIN, and that LLC is taxed as a S Corp or C Corp. Generally, you don't have to send it to them. So I'm going to show you now a bunch of links, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. The longer video, I spend more time on each one of these. So if you want to go right now to the longer video, that would probably save you a little bit of time. So let's pop over here and look at what we've got here. So I'm not going to give you a link to this because I don't know who this company is other than we get our stuff from them. But I'm not going to give you a link so you can see where I got this. But we use LaserLink. That's just what we've always used. It seems like it's a pretty solid company. Where we go here, we can download the software, as you can see. This one here, you're right, it's $80. Don't worry, I'm going to show you a different option. It handles all the forms. And then we will buy the forms separately. So this is just the software. Now, when I first started, we just went to Home Depot. The big thing I want you to note is that when you go to buy the software or the forms, make sure you're getting the right ones. There's lots of different kind of 1099s. What we're focusing in right here is 1099 NEC and a little bit on the 1099 miscellaneous. The 1099 NEC right there. So here right now, Office Depot, 1099 NEC, laser forms with software. It has the 4 parts. You can e-file it. So you can check out where you want to go related to that. I'm going to give you a link to the Form W-9. The Form W-9 is what they should have given you throughout the year, meaning you would have requested it, but they fill out to tell you their name, their business name, how are they taxed, right? So if they're an LLC here and they're taxed as an S or a C, well, then they're probably exempt. If they're an individual, probably sent to them. If they're a C Corp or an S Corp, you're probably not. And they're going to then sign this to say this info is correct, and under penalties of perjury, they're giving you that info. They're not going to give you a Social Security number and an EIN. It's either or. You don't get to decide. They do. Social Security number, most likely they're going to pay self-employment tax on that. If it's an EIN, well, maybe. If it's going to an EIN that is taxed as a Schedule C. Bottom line is that when you're looking at this, this is the form that you need. Now, small business owners, let's just talk practical. Oh, crap, I don't have the Form W-9. Well, send it to them, request it, at least get this info so you don't file these things late. But you do need to get that W-9 on file. You just keep the W-9. You don't turn it in. You just keep it for your file. But it's what you use to show, well, this is what I got from this individual to send them the Form 1099. Now, if you're wanting to know the difference between employees that would get a W-2 or the Form 1099 miscellaneous or the 1099 NEC, I'm going to give you a link here and you can read this to your heart's content. One thing I'll note to you is just because somebody works from home doesn't make them an independent contractor. Just because they set their own hours doesn't make them an independent contractor. If they're only providing the services for you and nobody else, they don't have a separate company, then they're probably an employee. So really what I want you to hear is if you're sending a 1099 to somebody and it's their Social Security number, you really need to pause and probably stop it. And they need to be an employee moving forward. You need to pay them as an employee. Now, you're right. You got different opinions and your accountant said this or that. Good for you. Just giving you some resources here. Now, on the Form 1099 NEC, I'm giving you a link to that form. And what I want to point out to you is on this Form 1099 NEC right there, non-employee compensation, you're putting in, and you're not going to be able to handwrite this, okay? You need to type it up, and you're not going to be able to print this and form fill it and send it to the IRS. They're going to tell you right here, you can't do that. You're just going to put your name, your business name, your address, what's your EIN. Do you have an EIN? Yeah, well, you're putting it there. What's the recipient's TIN? Whatever they gave you. If it's social, it's going there. If it's an EIN, it's going there. What's their name? What's their address? And then how much did you pay them? I don't have clients that we get into this box 2 direct sales. I don't have clients that withhold tax, federal or state. So I'm giving you the instructions if you want to read any more about that. What I want you to see here is on page 1, the IRS tells you right here, you cannot print that, even if you can print it in red and send it to the IRS if you are mailing in your Form 1099 NECs. What the IRS is going out of their way is to say, this is just for an example. Now, they do give you a link here where you can order the forms, which I'll give you a link to that as well. But depending on where you are and the timing of watching this video, if you're staring down within 30 to 60 days, you better go buy the forms. I don't think you're going to get them in time, even under normal conditions. But on this Form 1099, if you're mailing it in, which is most small businesses, well, you're sending them the red form, and I'm going to skip ahead, along with the Form 1096, okay? So then when we look here, you're sending the recipient copy B. That's the same information. I do want you to note that when you see certain forms, depending on where you buy them, there would be potentially this here, and then an exact duplicate of this form and lines here, and another one possibly down here. If you have 3 of these on one form, you're only filling out 1 per person. So I just found this online. This is an example. See how this has 3 of these forms on one page? Well, you're not going to send this to, if this is George Smith, you don't fill out George Smith's info and payment down here and George Smith again. George Smith got 1, he's done. John Doe got another, done. Lucy Green got another, done. If you have a blank, then you mark that a void. All right, so with that being said, there's also then a Form 1099 Miscellaneous. 1099 Miscellaneous, really the only thing we use it for is if rents are being paid, then we're going to send the 1099 Miscellaneous with rents that were paid. Now, if it's being paid to a real estate agent or to a real estate management company, the rent that is, well, then you don't send the 1099. But we use it for the other income. What's other income? Well, pretty much if it's not fallen in any of these other categories, if it's not something that goes on a 1099 NEC, well, it's going on 1099 Miscellaneous. Now, I'm going to also give you the instructions to the 1099 Miscellaneous and NEC. I'm just going to point a couple of things out to you. One, if you just look right here, who do you send a 1099 Miscellaneous to? Boom, they lay it out. Also, it lays out down here about gross proceeds paid to attorneys. So you're gonna send a 1099 NEC if you paid for legal services. If you paid a settlement, which most small businesses, that's 1 in a million that you paid a settlement through an attorney, well, then you're using the 1099 Miscellaneous. Let's see. Then also, here's the 1096. Now, the 1096 is if you're mailing it to the IRS, you're going to send in this red copy, which you can't print this, as they tell you here. This is just for example purposes. You got to buy the special form that's scannable. Don't handwrite it. If you handwrote it, good for you. I'm just telling you how you're supposed to do it. But you put your file, your business name, address, who to contact, telephone, email, fax, your EIN, or if you don't have one, your social. Now, when it says the number of forms right here, they don't mean the number of pages. If you'll just read right here on the last page on box 3, what they'd be telling you as an example here, on this, you would mark down that they have 3 forms, okay? 1, 2, 3. It wouldn't be that you're sending 1 page. Now, if only 2 of these were filled out and that one was blank, marked void, well, then you would list that there were 2 forms when we're talking about this right here. We don't have clients that had taxes withheld. Then that's the total amount reported on the Form 1096, well, then basically what you're doing is you're adding up all the amounts. So if you paid in this example here, there was 28,000 here, 10,000 there, and 12,000 there, you'd add up those amounts, and that's what would go then in that box. Now, if you're using software, it should just take care of all of this for you instead of you trying to fill this stuff out on your own. I'm going to also give you the instructions to the Form 1096. One of the reasons I want you to note the instructions is this will be where it tells you where to mail the Form 1096 with your Form 1099s. Again, you're only mailing red copies of the official forms that you bought, because they have to be scannable and readable. But depending on what state you're in is where you are mailing it. For whatever reason, on the actual Form 1096, they don't give you a complete for all states. So that's why you got to look here on the instructions. Plus, you've got all the other information you'd want. If you want to order the forms, it's really kind of too late unless you're doing that way in advance. There's a link. If you do want to e-file the forms with the IRS, you got to have an IRS account, an IRS account. You're going to have to apply for it. Don't know if there's time. If you want to go through that, good, go for it. We don't do it, so you'll just have to figure that out on your own. What we do is we get the software, we use it. The great thing with the software, and especially if you get the same software year after year, is that the information carries over. So for us, we're doing it for multiple clients. So that payer information is going to carry over from one year to the next. If they're paying routinely, different businesses that have to get a 1099 NEC, then we've got that information just that carried over from one year to the next. So hopefully that is giving you enough information to kind of get it up and running. You know, when in doubt, send a 1099 other than you paid by credit card. If you are like, well, they're an LLC, do I need to send one or not? I don't have a W-9. I don't know if they're an S Corp or C Corp. We'll send one, right? My biggest caution is if you're sending it with a Social Security number on it, you got to reevaluate whether or not they need to be an employee moving forward. And you're never going to send a 1099 NEC or a 1099 miscellaneous to an employee. Everything should be reflected on that W-2 period. All right. Hopefully that's helpful. Just checking my notes here. I think I covered everything with you. Again, in the body of this video, I've got a link to the longer one where I spend more time on all those pages that I just went through. And then I got a link to the shorter one, which I doubt you want to go to the shorter one if you made it all the way to here. And if you made it to here and you're not a subscriber, boy, I'd love that. Hopefully I gave you some good information here. And I'll say this, don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. Have a great one.